Wretchedness. Man is vile enough to bow down to beasts and even worship them. Inconstancy. Things have various qualities and the soul various tendencies, for nothing presented to the soul is simple. And the soul never applies itself simply to any subject. That is why the same thing makes us laugh and cry. I'll refer to the French here. Inconstance. Les choses ont diverses qualités. The soul et l'âme ne s'offre jamais simple à aucun sujet. So the soul doesn't offer itself simply to any subject. Never applies itself simply to any subject. Sense that the soul is some kind of Heisenberg principle. It's never to be found in one place. It's always in two places at least at the same time. De là vient qu'on pleure et qu'on rit d'une même chose. That's why the same thing makes us laugh and cry. Inconstancy. We think playing upon man is like playing upon an ordinary organ. It is indeed an organ, but strange, shifting and changeable. Those who only know how to play an ordinary organ would never be in tune on this one. You have to know where the keys are. I think this might be a critique of Descartes, who considered the human as a mechanism, as animals, as mere robotic creatures. We are so unhappy that we can only enjoy something which we should be annoyed to see go wrong. And that can and does constantly happen to thousands of things. Anyone who found the secret of rejoicing when things go well without being annoyed when they go badly would have found the point. It is perpetual motion. Those 4 words, it is perpetual motion, a great sort of motto or maxim of the whole of Blaise Pascal. The idea of constant shifting, constant movement. C'est le mouvement perpétuel. It is not good to be too free. It is not good to have all one needs. Il n'est pas bon d'être trop libre. Il n'est pas bon d'avoir toutes les nécessités. Tyranny consists in the desire to dominate everything regardless of order. Often we encounter Blaise Pascal as a defender of perhaps the elites or at least of power structures, but we should be clear that he's not defending despotism, he's not defending cruelty in power, he's not defending tyranny, he's defending order above all else. And of course Blaise Pascal was writing in a terribly turbulent time during French history in the 17th century. When it comes to deciding whether we should make war, kill so many men, condemn so many Spaniards to death, it is a single man who decides, and an interested party at that. It ought to be an impartial third party. In fact, laws are so vain that he would break free of them, so it is useful to deceive him. This really bears repeating. Laws are so vain, laws are so useless, that man would break free from them. People would break free from them knowing that they're vain. So, Pascal continues, it is useful to deceive him. Better for someone to follow the law, despite its arbitrariness, than break the law upon realizing that the law is so paper thin. What basis will he take for the economy of the world he wants to rule? Will it be the whim of each individual? What confusion! Will it be justice? he does not know what it is. If he did know, he would certainly never have laid down this most commonly received of all human maxims, that each man should follow the customs of his country. Chacun suivre les mœurs de son pays. Each man should follow the customs of his own country. So those cigarette paper thin rules, or rules without much reason, in a whole web of law, makes sense because order prevails over disorder, unity over disunity, despite the fact that the law itself might be highly arbitrary. So, man does not know what it is, the origins of justice. If he did know, he would certainly never have laid down this most commonly received of all human maxims, that each man should follow the customs of his own country. True equity would have enthralled all the peoples of the world with all its splendour, and lawgivers would not have taken as their model the whims and fancies of Persians and Germans in place of this consistent justice. We should see it planted in every country of the world, in every age, whereas we do not see it. Whereas what we do see is that there is nothing just or unjust, but changes colour as it changes climate. 3 degrees of latitude upset the whole of jurisprudence, and 1 meridian determines what is true. Basic laws change when they have been in force only a few years. Law has its period. The entry of Saturn into the house of the lion marks the origins of any given crime. It is a funny sort of justice whose limits are marked by a river. True on this side of the Pyrenees, false on the other. I think it's really worth to hear the French. I'll do my best here. This is talking about the caprice, le caprice de chaque particulier. Quelle confusion! Sera-ce sur la justice? Il l'ignore. Again, les caprices of Persia, the capricious nature of the law. On le verrait planté par tous les états du monde et dans tous les temps, au lieu qu'on ne voit rien de juste ou d'injuste que ne change de qualité en changeant de climat. So justice, in essence, changes with a few degrees in changing of the climate. 3 décrets d'élévation du pôle renversent toute la jurisprudence. Un méridien décide de la vérité. 1 meridian decides on the truth. Un peu d'années de possession, les lois fondamentales changent. Le droit à ces époques, l'entrée de Saturne au Lion nous marque l'origine d'un tel crime. Even the cosmos, the configuration of the zodiac, would mark the origins of such and such a crime. Plaisante justice qu'une rivière borne. I love the word plaisante in French. We have the word pleasantries in English, meaning an old-fashioned word for banter, coming from light-hearted talk. Tu plaisantes in French would mean like, you're joking, you're kidding, you're just jibing, or it's just banter. It's very elegant in the French. Plaisante justice qu'une rivière borne. If I can find the English somewhere around here. It is a funny sort of justice whose limits are marked by a river. It's nice even in English. It is a funny sort of justice whose limits are marked by a river. Plaisante justice qu'une rivière borne. Vérité au-dessus des Pyrénées, erreur au-delà. True on this side of the Pyrenees, false on the other. To continue with the English, they confess that justice does not lie in these customs, but resides in natural laws common to every country. So of course people will say, when Blaise Pascal was talking about, of course, moral relativism, the difficulty in justifying one's natural laws, the common sense attitudes to the world. Well, Pascal argues there is no divine justice without God. They confess that justice does not lie in these customs, but resides in natural laws common to every country. I think it might be worth delving into a bit of anthropology at some point. You could see common themes across many cultures. Banning of incest, for example, seems to be very, very common. That seems to have a strong evolutionary basis. Obviously, genetically speaking, it's not a good idea to marry your sister or even your cousin. So that seems to be a consistent thing across many cultures. But he was writing well before not just anthropology, of course, sociology as well. And some people would say Blaise Pascal was one of the first sociologists, first to discuss custom, the arbitrariness of social mores. So those people who would talk about natural law common to every country, they would certainly maintain this obstinately if the reckless chance which distributed human laws had struck on just one which was universal. But the joke is that man's whims have shown such great variety that there is not one. Larceny, incest, infanticide, parricide, everything has at some time been accounted a virtuous action. Blaise Pascal knew the Old Testament better than anyone, and really knew it better than everyone. So I think he knows quite well in the same chapter of the Bible, murder is outlawed and then murder is encouraged. Could there be anything more absurd than that a man has the right to kill me because he lives on the other side of the water and his prince has picked a quarrel with mine, though I have none against him? There no doubt exist natural laws, but once this fine reason of ours was corrupted, it corrupted everything. Nothing more is ours. What we call ours is by convention. It is by virtue of senatorial decrees and votes of the people that crimes are committed. Just as we once used to suffer for our vices, we now suffer for our laws. Just as once we used to suffer for our vices, we now suffer for our laws. The result of this confusion is that one man says that the essence of justice is the authority of the legislator, another the convenience of the sovereign, another present custom, and that is the most reliable. Merely according to reason, nothing is just in itself, everything shifts with time. Custom is the whole of equity for the sole reason that it is accepted. I'll repeat that. Custom is the whole of equity for the sole reason that it is accepted. Let's not forget the title of this part of the Pensées. In English, Wretchedness, and in French, Misère or misery. But misère sort of extending to the baseness of all human behavior, according to Blaise Pascal. Hence his focus on law, the use of order. That is the mystic basis of its authority. Custom is the whole equity for the sole reason that it is accepted, and that is the mystic basis of its authority. Anyone who tries to bring it back to its first principle destroys it. Nothing is so defective as those laws which correct defects, or which correctly defects. There's a typo here. Anyone obeying them because they are just is obeying an imaginary justice, not the essence of the law, which is completely self-contained. It is law and nothing more. Anyone wishing to examine the reason for this will find it so trivial and feeble that, unless he is used to contemplating the marvels of human fancy, he will be amazed that in a century it has acquired so much pomp and reverence. The art of subversion, of revolution, is to dislodge established customs by probing down to their origins in order to show how they lack authority and justice. There must, they say, be a return to the basic and primitive laws of the state, which unjust custom has abolished. There is no surer way to lose everything. Nothing will be just if weighed in these scales. Yet the people readily listen to such arguments. They throw off the yoke as soon as they recognize it, and the great take the opportunity of ruining them and those whose curiosity makes them examine received customs. This is why the wisest of legislators used to say that men must often be deceived for their own good. We must remember the French invented the idea of usurping or revolting against the nation state, against the priestly caste and the aristocracy. Perhaps Pascal could smell something in the air. It's a good century before the French Revolution. France, being one of the biggest countries in Europe, having, I think, the biggest landmass then and now, has always had a ruggedly individualistic basis. The inventors of, you could say, the Enlightenment, or at least the personhood within the Enlightenment, the idea of the individual above the group. It's also worth saying they gave the Americans the sense of independence, the smell of independence. They helped America carve out its early idea of itself. It strapped the boots on the country. It gave them the statue. It is from France that the idea of a modern individual exists, the undivided self individual. And I feel Blaise Pascal was in the middle of all of these early seeds of individualism. Men must often be deceived for their own good. And another sound politician who said, when he asks about the truth that is to bring him freedom, it is a good thing that he should be deceived. The truth about the usurpation must not be made apparent. It came about originally, without reason and has become reasonable. So a law can come into act without reason and by its own almost sacred essence. It's the sacred movement of the wheels of justice. It becomes good in itself. He talks about the mystic basis of justice, the mystic basis, the mechanism of the law. It came about originally without reason and has become reasonable. We must see that it is regarded as authentic and eternal, and its origins must be hidden if we do not want it soon to end. Justice. Justice is as much a matter of fashion as charm is. 3 hosts. In fact, I'm going to skip this bit. Mine, thine. This is my dog, said these poor children. That is my place in the sun. There is the origin and image of universal usurpation. Diversity. Theology is a science, but at the same time, how many sciences? A man is a substance, but if you dissect him, what is he? Heart, head, stomach, veins, each vein, each bit of vein, blood, each humour of blood. A town or a landscape from afar off is a town and a landscape, but as one approaches, it becomes houses, trees, tiles, leaves, grass, ants legs, and so on, ad infinitum. All that is comprehended in the word landscape. Une ville, une campagne, de loin est une ville et une campagne, mais à mesure qu'on s'approche, ce sont des maisons, des arbres, des tuiles, des feuilles, des herbes, des fourmis, des gens de fourmis à l'infini. Tout cela s'enveloppe sous le nom de campagne. Landscape, campagne. What is it that the word campagne encompasses? Again, for me, Heisenberg's principle, two things at the same time. Almost a Whitman-esque division of the cells of a leaf of grass. Injustice. It is dangerous to tell people that laws are not just because they obey them only because they believe them to be just. That is why they must be told at the same time that laws are to be obeyed because they are laws, just as superiors must be obeyed because they are superior. That is how to forestall any sedition, if people can be made to understand that, and that is the proper definition of justice. Injustice. Jurisdiction is not defined in terms of the one administering, but the one administered. It is dangerous to tell that to the people. But the people have too much faith in you. It will not harm them and may help you. It should therefore be published abroad. Feed my sheep, not yours. You owe me pasturage. And one of the most beautiful of many, many, many beautiful passages, but really in terms of the measured, the balance, I should say, the balanced and measured nature of the next passage, this is one of the most beautiful ones you're going to hear in all of the Pensées. When I consider the brief span of my life absorbed into the eternity which comes before and after, the small space I occupy and which I see swallowed up in the infinite immensity of spaces, of which I know nothing, and of which know nothing of me, I take fright, and am amazed to see myself here rather than there. There is no reason for me to be here rather than there, now rather than then. Who put me here? By whose command and act were this time and place allotted to me? I'll read it back in French, but I'd love to just zoom in on who put me here. In the French, qui m'y a mis? Quand je considère la petite durée de ma vie, absorbée devant l'éternité précédente et suivante, le petit espace que je remplis et même que je vois, abîmé dans l'infinie immensité des espaces que j'ignore et qui m'ignorent, je m'effraie et m'étonne de me voir ici plutôt que là, car il n'y a point de raison pourquoi ici plutôt que là, pourquoi à présent plutôt que lors. Qui m'y a mis? Par l'ordre et la conduite de qui ce lieu et ce temps a-t-il été destiné à moi? There's another tiny little bell I like to ring in this passage. Why here rather than there? Pourquoi ici plutôt que là? There's a lot of Richard Rorty in these passages, the pragmatist of 20th century America, pragmatist philosopher, who described an ideal world where everyone could subscribe to their own thought system, their language game, their understanding, deconstruction of the world, while remaining ironically distant to this. Richard Rorty and I think Blaise Pascal both land upon the same idea in a word of contingency of being born where one was at a certain time. There is a sense of a certain or for the mystery of being located or planted into the world when one was. My reading of this particular situation is almost divine alienation. When I consider the brief span of my life absorbed into the eternity which comes before and after, the small space I occupy and which I see swallowed up in the infinite immensity of spaces of which I know nothing and which know nothing of me, I take fright and am amazed to see myself here rather than there. There is no reason for me to be here rather than there, now rather than then. Who put me here? By whose command and act were this time and place allotted to me? Pascal believes someone allotted him his time here. For a Christian, he is rather exposed to the alienation of being planted in the world at this particular time. This place, this time, why was it destined to him at that moment? Why isn't he living now? Why not 100,000 years before? Who put him there and then? Someone who didn't live to his 40th birthday. Continuing. Wretchedness. Job and Solomon. If our condition were truly happy, we should not need to divert ourselves from thinking about it. Contradictions. Pride counterbalances all these miseries. Man either hides or displays them, and glories in his awareness of them. One must know oneself. Even if that does not help in finding truth, at least it helps in running one's life, and nothing is more proper. What causes inconstancy is the realization that present pleasures are false, together with the failure to realize that absent pleasures are vain. Injustice. They have found no other way of satisfying their concupiscence without doing wrong to others. Job and Solomon. Ecclesiastes shows that man without God is totally ignorant and inescapably unhappy, for anyone is unhappy who wills but cannot do. Now he wants to be happy and assured of some truth, and yet he is equally incapable of knowing and of not desiring to know. He cannot even doubt. For me, this is a pretty spot-on description of depression. Anyone is unhappy who wills but cannot do. The raw sense of desire with no location. It's like an arrow shooting towards nothing and not understanding why or what projects the arrow in the first place. Now he wants to be happy and assured of some truth, and yet he is equally incapable of knowing and of not desiring to know. He cannot even doubt. But perhaps this matter goes beyond the scope of reason. Let us then examine what it has devised in matters over which it has control. If there is one thing to which, in its own interest, it must most earnestly have applied itself, it is the search for the sovereign good. Let us see then where these powerful and penetrating souls have placed it, and whether they are in agreement. One says the sovereign good consists in virtue, another in sensual pleasure, another in following nature, another in truth. Happy the man who could know the reasons for things, another in total ignorance, another in indolence, another in resisting appearances, another in never feeling surprise. To be surprised at nothing is almost the only way to find happiness and keep it. And the good skeptics in their ataraxia, doubt and perpetual suspension of judgment. Others, even wiser, say that it cannot be found, not even by wishing. That is a fine answer. So we must see whether this fine philosophy has come to any certain conclusions after such long and arduous toil. perhaps at least the soul will come to know itself. Let us hear the regent masters of the world on this subject. What have they thought about its substance? Have they been any luckier in locating it? What could they have discovered about its origin, duration, destination? Could it be then that the soul is too noble a subject for its feeble understanding? I think there's a clue there. The soul is too noble a subject for any ordinary, feeble understanding. Let us lower its gaze then on to matter. Let us know if it knows what its own body, to which it gives life, is made of, and the others it observes and moves at will, as a nod to Bataille, later in the 20th century, to know one's own body as the source of truth. What have they known about it, these great dogmatists to whom no knowledge is denied? That would surely be enough if reason were reasonable. It is quite reasonable enough to admit that it has so far found no firm truth, but it has not yet given up hope of finding one. Therefore, Blaise Pascal is doubting that reason is reasonable. Reason itself has an inherent irrationality. On the contrary, it pursues the quest as fervently as ever and is confident of possessing all the strength necessary for success. We must then finish off the argument and, after looking at its powers through their effects, examine them in themselves. Let us see if it lies within the powers and grasp of reason to seize the truth.